Victober goal completed. I have finally gotten a matte and framed Jane Eyre. I finished her probably a couple of Victobers ago, and I finished Alice in Wonderland, which is also a Victorian character, quite a few years ago now, and she's been framed for a while, but I wasn't. I just was being lazy and didn't frame uh, get a mat for Jane Eyre. But I finally did, and I got her in there good enough for now. It's not perfect. You can still see some white space, but I am kind of over it, and it's good enough. So, yay! It's done. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Rainy and this is Rainy Day Reads, and today we are here for a long overdue Victober wrap-up video. I read, I believe, a total of 6 Victorian works in October this year, and I want to tell you about them all. So let's get started. I have my bingo board that I believe I got from Roy's channel. He's one of the hosts this year for the 10th anniversary. And I am going to be going over what I read, and I will kind of tell you as I go what prompts I was able to fulfill in this for this bingo board. And I will tell you that I am pretty sure that I got Dracula level. Yay! Which, honestly, getting Dracula level, if you read probably 2, 3 big works of Victorian literature, you're going to find a lot of these categories in them. So, yeah, maybe not Dracula level ones. I mean, I did pick some specifically for those categories, but there's a lot of these prompts in like one book of Victorian literature. So let's get into it because there is a lot. So let's talk about the first thing I read. The first thing I read is Sonnets of the Portuguese by, I almost said Mary Elizabeth Braddon. No. Elizabeth Barrett Browning. We're off to a great start, aren't we? This is just a short little book of poetry by Browning. I am not a big poetry fan, but I do love these. They're short, they're sonnets. Each one is only about half of a page. So it was really pretty easy to get through them. I cannot tell you much about them other than, there's a big focus on, death and spirituality and love in all those different poems. So, poetry is never going to be my favorite thing, but this did go for Katie's prompt of being something that's not a novel. It's a book of poetry. So there you go. The next book I read was The Beatitudes by Charles Spurgeon. This is a nonfiction. It's a kind of a compilation of a lot of his sermons that were about the Beatitudes from the book of Matthew in the Bible. And this was just a really interesting look at the Beatitudes. I read this as part of the read along with Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia, Dia from Novel Idea, and Chrissy from Chrissy's Purple Library. And they do a Spurgeon read-along every Victober, and it is always fantastic. They just have wonderful insights, and their live shows, even though most of the time I don't make the actual live show, but whenever I listen to the playback, it's always really insightful, and this was no different. Spurgeon can be a little bit dense and hard to understand sometimes, but this one I felt was really easy, very accessible and readable. So I would definitely recommend this if you're looking for some Spurgeon sermons to read. Oh, and I forgot to say that this would go for both the not a novel, because it is nonfiction and it's a group of sermons, and also education, because this was educational. It may not like have spoken about education, uh, in a like a tangible, like this is what a boarding school was like, but it definitely was educational. So I'm counting it. The next book I read was my favorite of the Victober season, and possibly my favorite of the entire year, and that is Hester by Margaret Oliphant. This was just a masterpiece. I can see why it is one of Oliphant's, if not her most famous work. I guess also Miss Marchbanks is also a very popular one. But Hester, just from beginning to end, the characterization in this novel and the plot and the pacing, uh, there was a little bit of the pace was a little bit slow at the beginning because we were kind of building up and meeting the characters and kind of getting the psychology sort of behind how everybody interacts and the backstory and everything. But once we got through that, the pacing was just fantastic, and the characterization, the arcs that some characters make, some of the main characters, uh, the growth and everything, just the emotional depth of everything was just spot on. And my friend Joe and I have read um, a multitude of Margaret Oliphant's works so far together, and we both agreed that this was her best work that we have read to date. This is, I believe, one of her later books, so I can see where she has honed her craft. But yeah, everything about this book, I highly recommend this one if you're looking for, if you're only going to read one book by Margaret Oliphant, Hester would be the one that I would recommend, hands down. Yeah, just a brief summary of that one. We follow Hester, who is an orphaned, or no, she's not orphaned. She has a mother, but she's lost her father, and she and her mother are destitute and need to move into a kind of an apartment building that her very rich relative, Catherine, has offered to some of the family members that are not doing well. And Catherine is a banker. She actually runs the family bank, which was totally unheard of in that day for a woman to be basically its CEO of a company. And it just goes, I think by the time we get to see Catherine, she is basically retired, but she still basically is the figurehead of the bank. But we just get to see all that, the inner, like behind the scenes workings, and like and kind of all the backstabbing of the family members and all that kind of thing. And it was just really just heartbreaking and heartwarming and all the things. I just loved it. I could probably gush about it for an entire video, but I won't. I will spare you. So that one, I would say it went for Kate's challenge of a novel that features friendship. So there's definitely a lot of friendship in that one. It went for Marissa's challenge of a change in class status, because Hester and her mother had been fairly rich, and just through things that her father did, she is no longer rich. And it also Empire spotting. There was a lot of Empire spotting. There was India references um, and like other colonies that England was was part of the British Empire. Um, and let's see. Oh, I would say underrated woman writer. Yeah, I mean, I feel like people don't really read Oliphant in school or anything, so I would say she's probably underrated. I mean, I read her all the time now, but that's, you know, that's because I've heard of her through the booktube grapevine, not through, school or her being really a well-known out in the out in the world like most people would know about Dickens. Uh, Education, that was definitely talked about in Hester. And let's see. I would say I feel like it had a connection to Jane Austen. Just the overall domestic quality of it, and just kind of how all the family members and everybody kind of interacted, and even some of the plot lines. Definitely think it had, I would say, a connection to Jane Austen, even if they didn't like outrightly say it. I would say it felt a lot like a Jane Austen at times. So then the next book, which was not originally on my TBR, but was recommended to me and a entire Voxer group of Victorian literature lovers. She recommended My Flirtations by what's her name? Ella Epworth Dixon. That would be an underrated woman writer as well, because I had never ever heard of her. And this was just a short, humorous novella, probably, all just like different vignettes of this woman's, not Ella's, she was writing as a different character, but like a lady, a gentlewoman, and all these different men that she almost marries, or just has a flirtation with, or they want to marry her, but she has um, no desire to marry them, kind of. So it was just like funny interactions with all these people. And then at the end of the story, I listened to the about the author, and turns out that she ran in the same circles as Oscar Wilde. And that really made sense to me on a lot of levels after reading this book. In fact, one of her characters in one of the vignettes, I believe, was modeled off of Oscar Wilde, and you can definitely see it. But I just think that's so cool when I hear about people running in the same circles as other famous authors that I've loved for years. And just that she was part of their world. And yeah, it's just really fun. And she's part of the like New Woman movement, I believe, it said, so, which is very evident in this, and how her woman character interacts with everybody else, and just the progression of her story. Then I read Vice Versa by F. Amstey with Dia and Tiffany. We have gotten kind of into a tradition of reading a funny book during Victober together. The first 2 years we read Jerome K. Jerome's Three Men on a Boat and Three Men on a Bummel. And those were pretty funny. Three Men on a Boat was very funny, and Three Men on a Bummel was okay. It was more like a travelogue, and it wasn't quite as funny as the first one. I would say Vice Versa was kind of middle of the road on the funny scale. It is touted as the first Freaky Friday, because there is a man and his son. His son is about to go off to boarding school, and he really doesn't want to. And his father is just very uncomfortable being with his son for some reason. He's not like a very loving parent, I guess. He's not mean, but he's just very rigid, and you must go back to boarding school, and because he just doesn't know how to handle his kid. And at a series of weird events, they flip-flop. So the son is now in the father's body, and the father is now in the son's body. Now, what we kind of were hoping for, because of obviously the Freaky Friday movies that we are accustomed to, is that we would get both sides of the story. We would see the father in the son's body at boarding school, and then maybe we would have the next chapter being with the son in the father's body trying to navigate being an adult in like a 13-year-old's body. That's not what we got. We got an entire story of the father at the boarding school, and it just wasn't, it kind of went on too long, and we thought that we would have rather seen both sides, because I think as adults now, we would think it was funnier to watch a child try to adult. But that's not what, so we just got the father trying to deal with boarding school, which would go for Hannah's prompt of discussing education, because it was a whole book on boarding school and kind of the horrors of boarding school. But we only got to see the son a couple of times, and it never felt like the son changed at all and like changed his perspective. We did get a little bit of that with the father, obviously, because he was the one that was apparently most traumatized by the whole situation. But it wasn't, but we all kind of decided that we think that maybe we were looking at it from the lens of having seen people do Freaky Friday better, even though it was the first and kind of like the source material. It wasn't the best that it could have been, and we have now seen it done better. So it was like, this is cute, but it's not as funny as we were hoping for. So that one got a 3-star from me, but hey, it fulfilled some prompts. It's cool with me, and I got to read with Tiffany and Dia, so it was all good. The next thing I read was The Adventures of the Speckled Band by Arthur Conan Doyle, and this was part of the Sherlock Holmes series, and it was a short story. And I have a full book of the complete works of Arthur Conan Doyle, or Sherlock Holmes, the complete works. But I actually ended up listening to it on Halloween, and it was actually really freaky. Like, I had to end up listening to it. Oh no, so I started it the day before Halloween in the evening, and it was actually kind of scaring me. So I had to turn it off, and I listened to it at work the next day. So, yeah. Or no, maybe I didn't listen to it at work, because I don't remember when Halloween was, but I listened to it during the day, is what I'm trying to say. And because listening to it at night, there was like creepy music and, just weird sounds in the walls and all kinds of things, and, screaming and all kinds of things. So I was like, I can't deal with this right before I go to bed. But it was very interesting. I really enjoyed it. I think it was Kate Howe that told me that was one of her favorite Sherlock Holmes stories. And I can see why. It was very intense. It was short, but it was intense. And it was just like, it was creepy. I don't even know how to really describe it other than that. It was just creepy. But nothing like super, like, it wasn't gory or anything. It was just like creepy. Yeah. There was like a crazy guy, and yeah, very, very scary. But so I was glad that I read that like Halloween-ish time frame, because, went with the vibe. I'm not really a Halloween person, but hey, if I'm gonna listen to a story on Halloween, it might as well go with the vibe. Yeah, so I got a Sherlock Holmes checked off my list, so that worked out. And it was not a novel, it was a short story. So again, another prompt for Katie. And then the last thing that I read, which I actually finished the day after Victober ended, but I'm still going to count it because I was like 90% done on October 31st. I had to stop, and because I think I fell asleep or something. But so was Love and Life, and it's do I have it written down? An old story in 18th century costume. So that one went for um, the prompt for Jess's prompt of set in a different era, because it was set in the 18th century, and also it was a retelling of the Cupid and Psyche myth. So, which I wasn't really sure that I knew what the Cupid and Psyche myth was. And it's hard to really tell you without kind of spoiling some things, but this centered around three daughters that were also gentry, also ended up penniless, and their relative was kind of supporting them, kind of like Hester. And at one point, the youngest and most beautiful daughter goes off to be a governess. I believe it was a governess, yeah, and or a companion of some sort. And she ends up, through a series of events, married to a man who she is not able to actually see. He is always like veiled, and he like says he has like a disease that he can't see sunlight and all this stuff. And then the family member that is supporting the youngest daughter's family gets wind of this and does not like it at all, and she becomes crazy. So this turned into a sensation novel about halfway through the book. It was, did I say this was by Charlotte Mary Young? I don't think I said that. And it started off very domestic. It was a little bit different than some of the other Charlotte Mary Young books that I've read. But Charlotte Mary Young is not a sensation novelist. But boy, did this turn into a sensation novel halfway through. And I read this for Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia, her Patreon, which I just started, which I just joined in October. So I wanted to definitely make sure that I participated in her Zoom chat about this. And pretty much everybody said the same thing, like, wow, it started off as like one kind of novel and it totally went 180 to a different novel in the end. But I really ended up liking it. I like sensation novels, and I didn't really have a sensation novel this time around. So I was glad whenever I was like, oh, this is very much a sensation novel. I didn't even know that's what I was getting. So I would say it didn't really have the character development that I would have liked to have seen and I thought was potentially possible. But being that it was a retelling of a myth, I was okay with it. Not a big deal. So yeah, I ended up liking it. I gave it, I would say that it was probably a 3.5 star for me, just because the first half of the book was pretty slow to me and nothing really outstanding happened. But then, of course, once the sensation novel part started, I had trouble even putting it down. So I would say it was a 3.5 to 4 stars for me. Yeah. It was a good time. It just took me more time than I thought to kind of get into it, but oh well. So those are the books that I actually finished for Victober. The only things that I didn't get finished yet were my rereads of Middlemarch and Our Mutual Friend. But I kind of thought that they might end up on the back burner since I had, reread them, and I had initially read Our Mutual Friend fairly recently, like within the last couple of years. So I kind of knew I might not be as interested to reread that one yet. I am still reading Middlemarch. I was reading that with my friend Allie from What Allie's Reading. And we just had to, for like personal busyness reasons. We had to put a hold on it. So hopefully we will get back to that in November and be able to continue reading that together because we're both really enjoying it. And it's been quite a few years since I've read Middlemarch. So I didn't really remember a lot of the particulars in it. So I am really enjoying a slow reread. And I like that it's slow with my friend Alicia. So yeah, that is everything, friends. I hope that you had a fantastic Victober. I did. And I will be back potentially right after this with my November TBR, even though we're like already over a weekend. But, hey, that's fine. All right, friends, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.